For most of human history, Antarctica existed more as a rumor than a place. Ancient maps left it blank. Early sailors spoke of it in uncertain tones. And even as the rest of the world was slowly measured, named, and claimed, the southernmost continent remained locked beneath a silence so complete it almost felt intentional. But Antarctica is not empty. It never was. Beneath miles of ice lies something far more unsettling than a frozen desert. A perfectly preserved archive of Earth's forgotten past. What makes Antarctica uniquely disturbing is not just its cold or its isolation, or even its deadly storms. It is the simple, haunting fact that ice remembers. Layer by layer, year after year, snowfall compressed into a vast, frozen memory bank. Air from tens of thousands of years ago still sits trapped in microscopic bubbles. Ancient microorganisms remain suspended in biological pause. Entire landscapes, mountains, lakes, and river systems, sleep beneath the ice sheet, untouched by sunlight for millions of years. In most places on Earth, time erases. In Antarctica, time is stored, and this raises a question that has quietly troubled scientists and explorers alike. What exactly have we not found yet? Because the deeper we drill, the stranger the discoveries become. Subglacial lakes sealed off since before human civilization. Microbial life surviving in conditions once thought impossible. Meteorites preserved so perfectly they look as if they fell yesterday. Each expedition that pushes further into the Antarctic interior does not simply answer questions. It creates new ones, often more unsettling than the last. But the mystery is not only scientific. There is something psychologically powerful about Antarctica that has pulled humans toward it for centuries. Again and again, explorers risked starvation, isolation, and death to reach a place that offered no cities, no gold, no obvious reward. Why? What drives humans to the very edges of habitability, into environments that seem almost designed to repel us? The story of Antarctica is therefore not just about ice and discovery. It is about the human obsession with the unknown, the same force that once pushed ships into uncharted oceans and now pushes drills deep into the frozen skin of a silent continent. For most of recorded history, Antarctica existed only as a theory, a ghost continent imagined by mapmakers who believed the Earth needed a great southern landmass to balance the known world. Ancient geographers called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. It appeared on maps long before any human had actually seen it, drawn more from mathematical symmetry than from observation. For centuries, Antarctica was less a place than an idea waiting to be proven wrong. By the 18th century, the age of exploration had already filled in most of the planet's blank spaces. Oceans had been crossed, trade routes mapped, and empires extended across continents. Yet the far south remained stubbornly hidden behind violent seas and floating walls of ice. Many believed that if a southern continent did exist, it would be lush and habitable, perhaps even rich in resources. Reality would prove far harsher. The first serious attempt to solve the mystery came with Captain James Cook in the 1770s. Cook did something no explorer before him had managed. He crossed the Antarctic Circle. His ships pushed through dangerous pack ice and brutal storms, sailing farther south than any human in recorded history at the time. But the continent itself remained just out of reach, protected by an almost defensive ring of ice. After months of dangerous navigation, Cook made a judgment that would shape exploration for decades. He concluded that if a southern continent existed, it was likely too remote and too frozen to be of practical value. The psychological effect of Cook's conclusion was powerful. Interest in the far south cooled for a time. But the silence did not last. In the early 19th century, sealers and explorers began pushing again into southern waters, driven less by curiosity and more by economic opportunity. And then, in the 1820s, the moment finally came. Multiple expeditions, Russian, British, and American, reported sightings of the Antarctic mainland almost simultaneously. Among them, the Russian expedition led by Fabian von Bellingshausen is often credited with one of the earliest confirmed sightings of the Antarctic continent in 1820. The unknown southern land was no longer theoretical, it was real, and it was far more hostile than anyone had hoped. Yet seeing Antarctica was one thing. Reaching its heart was something else entirely. The true heroic age of Antarctic exploration began at the start of the 20th century, when national pride, scientific ambition, and raw human obsession collided on the ice. Two names would become forever linked in one of history's most dramatic polar rivalries: Roald Amundsen of Norway and Robert Falcon Scott of Britain. Their target was simple in concept and nearly impossible in execution: the South Pole. Amundsen approached the challenge with cold efficiency. He studied Arctic survival methods, used experienced polar dogs, and optimized every aspect of his expedition for speed and endurance. Scott, by contrast, carried a heavier scientific agenda and relied partly on experimental transport methods that proved less reliable in the brutal Antarctic environment. The difference in strategy would become painfully clear. In December 1911, Amundsen's team reached the South Pole first, planting the Norwegian flag in the most remote place on Earth. It was a triumph of planning, discipline, and adaptation to extreme conditions. Weeks later, Scott and his exhausted team arrived to find Amundsen's tent already standing in the frozen silence. The psychological blow was devastating. On the return journey, Scott and his companions perished in the Antarctic interior, trapped by exhaustion, cold, and the unforgiving mathematics of distance and supply. Their story transformed Antarctica from a blank space on the map into something far more human. A place where ambition, miscalculation, endurance, and tragedy intersected in their purest forms. By the mid-20th century, Antarctica had shifted again. From a stage of heroic survival to a frontier of scientific investigation, permanent research stations appeared. Ice cores began revealing Earth's ancient climate history. Subglacial lakes were detected beneath kilometers of ice. The continent that once seemed empty was slowly revealing itself to be one of the most important scientific archives on the planet. And yet, even today, Antarctica remains only partially understood. Vast regions lie unmapped beneath the ice. Entire ecosystems may still be hidden in sealed subglacial environments. The continent that resisted discovery for centuries continues to resist full comprehension, because Antarctica was never just the last continent humans reached. It was, and still is, the place where the limits of human knowledge meet the quiet persistence of the unknown. What does the ice preserve? The frozen memory of Earth. When most people look at Antarctica, they see emptiness, an endless white desert, lifeless and silent. But this is one of the greatest visual deceptions on Earth, because Antarctic ice is not merely frozen water, it is an archive. Layer by layer, year after year, snowfall has compressed into a vast geological memory bank, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Unlike most environments on Earth, where wind, water, and life constantly erase the past, Antarctica does something extraordinary. It preserves, and what it preserves is quietly rewriting our understanding of Earth's history. 1. Ancient air, time trapped in bubbles. Deep within Antarctic ice cores are tiny air bubbles. Microscopic pockets of atmosphere sealed the moment snow first fell and hardened into ice. Some of these bubbles contain air that humans last breathed tens or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. To scientists, these are not just bubbles, they are time capsules. By analyzing the gases inside them, carbon dioxide, methane, oxygen ratios, researchers can reconstruct Earth's ancient climate with astonishing precision. This is how we know the rhythm of ice ages, warming periods, and atmospheric shifts long before written history existed. Philosophically, it is almost unsettling. The sky of the ancient world is still physically present beneath our feet. Antarctica does not just remember the past, it holds the air of vanished ages in suspended silence. 2. Microbial life in suspended time. Perhaps even more surprising is what the ice has done to life itself. In multiple deep ice samples and subglacial environments, scientists have discovered microorganisms that have remained frozen, not dead but dormant, for tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years. In some laboratory conditions, certain microbes have even shown the ability to revive once thawed. This challenges one of humanity's oldest assumptions, that extreme cold simply kills. Instead, Antarctic ice often acts as a biological pause button. Metabolism slows, activity stops, but in some cases, life endures in a state closer to sleep than death. This discovery has enormous implications, not only for Earth's past, but for astrobiology, the search for life on icy worlds, like Europa or Enceladus, because if life can persist in Antarctic ice, it may persist in far colder places beyond Earth. 3. Meteorites, messages from space. Antarctica is also one of the richest meteorite hunting grounds on the planet, but the reason is not obvious until you understand the physics of ice flow. Over thousands of years, the slow movement of Antarctic ice sheets acts like a conveyor belt, concentrating meteorites in certain exposed regions known as blue ice fields. Dark space rocks that would be lost in most environments stand out starkly against the pale ice. Many meteorites recovered in Antarctica are exceptionally well preserved because the cold, dry conditions slow chemical weathering. Some are older than any rock formed on Earth's surface, which means Antarctica is not only preserving Earth's memory, it is preserving fragments of the early solar system. 4. Hidden landscapes. Beneath the ice. Perhaps the most mind-bending discovery is what lies far below the ice sheet itself. Using radar and satellite mapping, scientists have revealed entire mountain ranges, ancient river valleys, vast subglacial lakes, and complex geological basins, all buried beneath kilometers of ice. One of the most famous is Lake Vostok, a massive liquid lake sealed beneath the ice for possibly millions of years. Environments like this are effectively isolated worlds, cut off from surface ecosystems since long before humans existed. Philosophically, this is extraordinary. Antarctica is not just frozen on the surface. It is layered with hidden worlds below, and we have only begun to explore them. Final reflection: ice as memory. When we ask what Antarctic ice protects, the answer becomes increasingly profound. It protects the chemistry of ancient skies, the survival limits of life, the debris of cosmic history, and entire landscapes lost to time. Antarctica is not empty. It is quietly full of the past. And perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: the deeper we drill into the ice, the more we are forced to confront how much of Earth's story is still frozen, still waiting, still not fully understood. Ice cores, Earth's deepest time capsules. If Antarctica is a frozen archive, then ice cores are the keys that unlock it. To the naked eye, an ice core looks almost disappointingly simple, just a long cylindrical column of compacted ice pulled from deep beneath the Antarctic surface. But scientifically and philosophically, Few objects on Earth contain more information about the past. Each meter of an ice core is a page in a planetary diary, written not in ink, but in snow, air, dust, and time. What makes ice cores extraordinary is not just their age, though some reach back over 800,000 years, but their precision. Unlike many geological records that blur over time, Antarctic ice preserves seasonal layers with remarkable clarity. In the right conditions, scientists can literally count years the way one counts tree rings. Ice in Antarctica does not forget easily. 1. How ice cores are formed every year. Snow falls on the Antarctic surface. At first it is soft and granular, but as more snow accumulates above it, the lower layers compress. Over decades and centuries, this snow transforms into firn, a dense, compacted snow, and eventually into solid glacial ice. During this slow compression, tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere become sealed inside. Nothing dramatic happens. No explosion, no sudden freeze. Just quiet, relentless pressure, year after year, locking pieces of the past into place. This slow formation is exactly what makes ice cores so scientifically valuable. The process creates a layered timeline where upper ice equals recent history, deeper ice equals progressively older climates, deepest ice equals ancient Earth conditions. It is vertical time, physically stacked beneath the Antarctic surface. 2. What scientists read inside ice cores. Ice cores are not studied for the ice itself. They are studied for what the ice contains. Inside each core, researchers analyze several critical signals. Ancient air bubbles. These reveal past concentrations of carbon dioxide, CO2, methane, CH4, oxygen ratios. From this, scientists reconstruct Earth's atmospheric history, isotope ratios in the ice. Different oxygen and hydrogen isotopes act like thermometers from the past, allowing researchers to estimate ancient temperatures with surprising accuracy. Dust and volcanic ash. Tiny particles trapped in the ice reveal ancient wind patterns, desert expansion periods, major volcanic eruptions, even evidence of large wildfires. In essence, each ice core is a multi-layered environmental record. 3. What ice cores revealed about Earth. Some of the most important discoveries about our planet's climate history come directly from Antarctic ice cores. They revealed the natural rhythm of ice, ages, the tight link between CO2 and global temperature, abrupt climate shifts in Earth's past, how quickly atmospheric conditions can change. One of the most unsettling findings is how rapidly climate transitions have occurred historically. In some periods, significant temperature shifts happened not over millennia, but over decades. From a philosophical standpoint, this challenges the comforting human belief that planetary systems always change slowly. Sometimes they do not. 4. The search for million-year ice. Today, one of the most ambitious scientific goals in Antarctica is the hunt for ice older than 1 million years. Why? Because current cores extend back about 800,000 years, and scientists suspect even older climate cycles are preserved deeper in untouched regions of the ice sheet. Finding million-year ice would allow researchers to answer one of Earth science's biggest mysteries. Why did the rhythm of ice ages change roughly 1 million years ago? This is one of the quiet frontiers of modern science. Not dramatic on the surface, but potentially transformative in understanding Earth's long-term climate behavior. Final reflection: ice that remembers. Ice cores force us to confront something deeply humbling. Human civilization has existed for only a thin upper layer of this frozen record. Empires rose and fell, languages formed and vanished, entire histories unfolded. While beneath Antarctica, the ice continued its slow, silent accumulation, Year after year, layer after layer, memory without intention. Perhaps the most philosophical truth ice cores reveal is this: the Earth has been keeping records long before humans learned to write. And even now, most of that frozen archive remains buried, waiting for us to ask the right questions. Ancient air bubbles trapped inside Antarctic ice are among the most extraordinary natural archives on Earth. To the naked eye, they appear insignificant, tiny, almost invisible pockets, frozen within clear layers of ice. But scientifically, they are nothing less than preserved pieces of the ancient atmosphere. Each bubble is a sealed time capsule containing the actual air that surrounded the planet tens or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. Unlike most historical evidence, which must be interpreted indirectly, these bubbles allow scientists to physically sample the breath of past worlds. The process begins quietly with snowfall. When snow first falls in Antarctica, it is light and porous, filled with modern air circulating freely between the snow crystals. But as years pass and more snow accumulates above, pressure slowly compresses the lower layers. The spaces between the grains shrink. The snow transforms into dense firn and eventually into solid glacial ice. During this gradual compression, the air pathways close off. Small pockets of atmosphere become trapped and permanently sealed. From that moment forward, the air inside those bubbles is effectively locked in time, isolated from the changing world above. What makes this phenomenon so powerful is its precision. Scientists drilling deep ice cores can extract these bubbles and directly measure ancient concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, and oxygen. This has allowed researchers to reconstruct Earth's atmospheric history with remarkable accuracy. Through these frozen samples, we now know the chemical signature of the air during past ice ages, warm interglacial periods, and major climate transitions. In many ways, these bubbles are more reliable than written history because they were not recorded by human memory. They were recorded by physics itself. One of the most important revelations from ancient air bubbles is the tight relationship between greenhouse gases and global temperature. Again and again, the ice record shows CO2 levels rising and falling in close alignment with warming and cooling cycles. This discovery fundamentally changed modern climate science. Before ice core research, the deep past of Earth's atmosphere was largely speculative. After it, the ancient climate system became measurable, testable, and far more complex than previously assumed. But beyond the science, there is something philosophically unsettling about these frozen pockets of air. When researchers release the gas from a bubble that formed 100,000 years ago, they are quite literally breathing molecules that once moved through prehistoric skies. The atmosphere of mammoths, early humans, and vanished ecosystems still exists in physical form beneath Antarctic ice. Time, in this case, did not erase, it preserved. Even more intriguing is the ongoing search for older and deeper records. Scientists believe that somewhere within the thick Antarctic ice sheet lie bubbles containing air from more than 1 million years ago. If recovered, they could reveal atmospheric conditions from a period of Earth's history we still only partially understand. Expeditions today continue drilling deeper, not because we lack data, but because each new layer has repeatedly shown that Earth's climate story is more dynamic and sometimes more fragile than earlier generations imagined. In the end, ancient air bubbles force us to confront a humbling reality. Human civilization measures time in centuries. Ice measures it in hundreds of thousands of years. Beneath Antarctica, the planet has been quietly storing the chemistry of its own past, waiting for a species curious enough and patient enough to finally read what was written in frozen air. Ice cores are one of the most powerful scientific tools ever taken from Antarctica. At first glance, they look simple, just long frozen cylinders drilled from deep beneath the ice sheet. But in reality, each core is a perfectly preserved timeline of Earth's past. Every winter snowfall that once fell silently over the continent was slowly compressed by the weight of future years, turning soft snow into dense glacial ice. During this slow transformation, tiny bubbles of ancient air became sealed inside, untouched by the modern world. What scientists pull from the ice today is not just frozen water. It is the actual atmosphere of ancient Earth, physically preserved across hundreds of thousands of years. As researchers drill deeper into the Antarctic ice sheet, they are effectively traveling backward in time. The upper layers of an ice core contain relatively recent history, but with every additional meter, the record becomes older, colder, and more distant from the human world. Some of the deepest Antarctic cores now reach back more than 800,000 years, long before cities, agriculture, or even early civilizations existed. Inside these layers, scientists analyze trapped gases like carbon dioxide and methane, measure oxygen isotope ratios that reveal ancient temperatures, and study microscopic dust that once traveled across prehistoric winds. Through this quiet forensic work, ice cores have allowed humanity to reconstruct the rhythm of ice ages, warming periods, volcanic eruptions, and atmospheric shifts with astonishing precision. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery from ice cores is how dynamic Earth's climate has always been. The frozen record shows that global temperatures and atmospheric composition have shifted dramatically many times in the planet's history, sometimes far faster than earlier scientists expected. In certain periods, major climate transitions unfolded not over slow geological ages, but within surprisingly short windows of time. This has forced researchers to rethink the comforting assumption that Earth's climate system always changes gradually and predictably. The ice suggests something more complex and sometimes more fragile. Today, the scientific frontier has moved even deeper with the search for what researchers call million-year ice. Somewhere in Antarctica, scientists believe there are undisturbed regions where ice older than 1 million years still survives. Finding and analyzing this ice could answer one of the biggest mysteries in climate science: why the cycle of ice ages shifted roughly 1 million years ago. Expeditions are now scanning the continent with radar and satellite mapping, looking for the rare locations where the ice has remained stable enough to preserve this ancient record. It is slow, meticulous work, but the potential insight is enormous. Philosophically, ice cores reveal something deeply humbling about humanity's place in time. Human history, the rise of empires, the spread of languages, the entire written record of civilization occupies only a thin surface layer compared to the immense frozen archive beneath Antarctica. While human societies rose and fell, the ice continued its silent accumulation year after year, storing atmospheric memories without intention or awareness. The Earth, in its own way, has been keeping records far longer than humans have existed to read them. And even now, most of that frozen memory remains buried, waiting patiently beneath the Antarctic ice for those determined enough to uncover it. Beneath Antarctica's endless white surface lies one of the most unsettling frontiers on Earth. For decades, the continent looked empty from above, silent, frozen, lifeless. But as radar, deep drilling, and satellite imaging improved, scientists began to realize something surprising. Antarctica was not just a frozen desert, it was hiding entire worlds beneath the ice. What researchers have discovered so far has fundamentally changed how we understand the continent and raised even more disturbing questions about what may still remain buried below. One of the most shocking discoveries was the existence of vast subglacial lakes. For years, scientists assumed the Antarctic ice sheet was frozen solid all the way down. That assumption collapsed when radar surveys revealed liquid water trapped beneath kilometers of ice. The most famous of these hidden bodies is Lake Vostok, a massive freshwater lake buried under roughly 4 kilometers of ice and sealed off from the surface for possibly millions of years. In isolation terms, it is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Yet, when researchers carefully sampled nearby accreted ice, they found evidence suggesting microbial life may exist within this dark, pressurized world. The implication was profound. If life can survive there, it could potentially survive in the icy oceans of distant moons like Europa. But Lake Vostok was only the beginning. Since its discovery, scientists have identified more than 400 subglacial lakes across Antarctica. Some are small and stable. Others appear to fill and drain slowly over time, forming a hidden hydrological network beneath the ice sheet. This means Antarctica is not just frozen on top. It is dynamically active below. Entire water systems are moving in total darkness, completely cut off from sunlight, storms, and surface ecosystems. Another major shock came from subglacial mapping. Using ice-penetrating radar, researchers discovered entire mountain ranges buried beneath the ice sheet. One of the most dramatic examples is the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a massive alpine-style range hidden entirely under the East Antarctic ice sheet. What makes this discovery especially puzzling is geological. Mountains of this size typically form at active tectonic boundaries, yet Antarctica's interior is relatively stable. Scientists are still trying to fully understand how such a large range formed and remained preserved for so long beneath the ice. It is a reminder that even the continent's deep geological history is not fully solved. Antarctica has also become one of the world's richest meteorite recovery zones. At first, this seems counterintuitive. Why would space rocks be easier to find in a frozen wasteland? The answer lies in the slow movement of ice. Over thousands of years, flowing glaciers act like conveyor belts, concentrating meteorites in exposed blue ice regions. Because the Antarctic environment is cold and extremely dry, many of these meteorites remain remarkably well preserved. Some are older than any rocks found on Earth's surface, offering direct physical clues about the early solar system. In a strange way, Antarctica is not only preserving Earth's past, it is preserving pieces of space history as well. Perhaps most biologically intriguing are the microorganisms found in extreme Antarctic ice and subglacial environments. Researchers have recovered microbes that survived prolonged freezing and intense pressure in conditions once believed too hostile for life. Some species show metabolic activity at temperatures near the freezing point of water, challenging long-held assumptions about the limits of biology. These discoveries have reshaped astrobiology research because they expand the range of environments where life might plausibly exist beyond Earth. What makes all these discoveries so psychologically powerful is not just their scientific importance, but their pattern. Again and again, Antarctica has revealed that what appears empty on the surface can conceal extraordinary complexity below. Each new expedition has reduced one mystery and uncovered several more. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: even today, vast portions of the Antarctic subglacial world remain unmapped. Radar coverage is incomplete. Deep drilling is limited. Entire basins and potential ecosystems may still lie undetected beneath kilometers of ice. Antarctica resisted human discovery longer than any other continent. There is growing evidence it may continue to resist full understanding for decades to come. Hidden ecosystems beneath Antarctica are one of the most astonishing discoveries of modern science because they challenge one of humanity's oldest assumptions: that complex life requires sunlight, warmth, and open air. Deep below the Antarctic ice sheet, In total darkness and crushing pressure, researchers have found environments that are not dead, but quietly alive. These systems do not resemble familiar surface ecosystems. They operate slowly, silently, and in conditions that would appear completely hostile to life as we know it. The story began when radar surveys revealed vast subglacial lakes sealed beneath kilometers of ice. At first, scientists assumed these lakes were sterile, frozen relics isolated from biology for millions of years. But careful analysis of ice accreted from Lake Vostok and direct sampling from other subglacial environments began to suggest something far more surprising. Chemical signatures indicated the possible presence of microbial ecosystems functioning in complete darkness. Instead of relying on sunlight and photosynthesis, these organisms appear to survive through chemosynthesis, deriving energy from chemical reactions involving minerals in the bedrock below. This discovery was scientifically disruptive. For centuries, the dominant model of life on Earth was built around the sun as the primary energy source. Antarctic subglacial ecosystems demonstrated that life can organize itself around entirely different energy pathways. In these hidden environments, microbes may feed on iron, sulfur, or other geochemical gradients slowly released from the Earth's crust. It is a biological strategy more commonly associated with deep-sea hydrothermal vents than with frozen continental interiors. Even more intriguing is the isolation factor. Some Antarctic subglacial lakes may have been sealed off from the surface for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. If microbial communities have survived continuously in such environments, they represent evolutionary time capsules. Their genetic adaptations could reveal how life responds to extreme pressure, permanent darkness, limited nutrients, and long-term environmental stability. Scientists are particularly interested in whether these ecosystems evolve slowly and conservatively, or whether isolation drives unexpected biological innovation. One of the most carefully studied examples is subglacial Lake Whillans, where direct sampling has confirmed active microbial life beneath the ice sheet. Researchers found a functioning ecosystem supported by chemical energy rather than sunlight, with microbial populations cycling nutrients in ways that resemble miniature, self-contained biospheres. The discovery confirmed what had once seemed unlikely. Antarctica's hidden lakes are not just frozen water pockets. They are living systems operating on unfamiliar rules. The philosophical implications of these findings extend far beyond Antarctica. If life can persist in such cold, dark, and isolated environments on Earth, the range of potentially habitable environments in the universe expands dramatically. Worlds once dismissed as too hostile, such as the icy moons Europa or Enceladus, now look far more biologically plausible. Antarctic hidden ecosystems have effectively become analog laboratories for astrobiology. Yet despite the progress, our understanding remains fragmentary. Only a tiny fraction of subglacial lakes have been directly sampled. Vast regions of the Antarctic underice landscape remain mapped only by indirect radar signals. Entire ecosystems could exist that we have not yet detected, operating in slow biological cycles beneath kilometers of frozen isolation. What Antarctica has revealed so far is both exciting and humbling. Life, it seems, is far more adaptable than human intuition once allowed, and the places we once assumed were empty may simply be places we had not yet learned how to see. Ancient meteorites found in Antarctica are among the most scientifically valuable objects ever recovered on Earth, because they are not just rocks. They are fragments of the early solar system, preserved in near pristine condition. What makes Antarctica uniquely important in this search is not that more meteorites fall there than elsewhere, but that the ice itself acts like a slow-moving collector and preservation system. Over thousands of years, falling space rocks become embedded in the ice sheet. And as glaciers gradually flow, final thoughts in English, no hyphens, continuous style, they transport these meteorites into exposed blue ice regions where they accumulate in unusual concentrations. In most environments on Earth, meteorites quickly disappear. Rain, soil chemistry, vegetation, and erosion begin altering them almost immediately. Antarctica is different. The continent is extremely cold, extremely dry, and largely free of biological activity that would normally degrade exposed rock. As a result, meteorites that landed tens of thousands of years ago can remain remarkably well preserved, sometimes appearing almost freshly fallen despite their immense age. This natural deep freeze effect has turned Antarctica into the richest meteorite hunting ground on the planet. Since systematic searches began in the late 20th century, scientists have recovered tens of thousands of meteorites from Antarctic ice fields. Among them are some of the oldest known materials in the solar system, dating back more than 4.5 billion years. These rocks formed before Earth itself fully solidified, meaning they contain chemical signatures from the earliest stages of planetary formation. In a very real sense, when researchers study Antarctic meteorites, they are studying the raw building blocks from which our world emerged. One of the most famous discoveries came in 1984, when a meteorite later known as ALH 84001 was recovered from the Allen Hills region. This rock originated from Mars and sparked intense scientific debate decades later when researchers reported microscopic structures that some initially interpreted as possible fossilized Martian microbes. Although the biological interpretation remains controversial, the discovery dramatically increased scientific interest in Antarctic meteorite fields and reinforced the continent's importance for planetary science. Beyond individual headline finds, the broader scientific value of Antarctic meteorites lies in statistical abundance. Because so many specimens have been recovered from relatively concentrated areas, researchers can study patterns in asteroid composition, early solar system chemistry, and the frequency of different meteorite types with far greater confidence than would be possible from scattered global finds. Antarctica, in effect, has become a natural archive of space debris delivered over immense spans of time. Philosophically, there is something striking about this process. While human history unfolded on the surface, civilizations rising, expanding, and disappearing, fragments of distant asteroids and planets were quietly accumulating on the Antarctic ice sheet, preserved without intention by the coldest environment on Earth. The continent that once seemed empty has turned out to be one of the planet's most important storage sites for extraterrestrial history. Even today, large areas of Antarctica remain only partially surveyed for meteorites. As ice flow continues to expose new blue ice fields, additional discoveries are almost certain. Each new specimen has the potential to refine our understanding of how planets form, how materials moved through the early solar system, and how often Earth has been visited by debris from beyond its atmosphere. In the frozen silence of Antarctica, pieces of cosmic history are still waiting to be found. Frozen organisms in Antarctica are one of the most unsettling discoveries of modern science because they blur the line between life and suspension. At first glance, anything trapped in deep ice for thousands of years should be dead beyond recovery. For a long time, that was exactly what scientists believed. Extreme cold was assumed to be a biological endpoint, but as research pushed deeper into Antarctic ice cores, permafrost layers, and subglacial environments, that assumption began to crack. What researchers found instead was far more complex. In some cases, the ice had not killed life. It had paused it. The key lies in temperature and stability. In Antarctica's deep ice, conditions can remain consistently below freezing for immense spans of time, with very little environmental disturbance. Under these conditions, metabolic processes in microorganisms can slow to nearly undetectable levels. Cells do not actively grow or reproduce, but they also do not fully degrade. Instead, they enter a state scientists sometimes describe as cryptobiosis, an extreme form of dormancy in which biological activity is reduced to a near standstill. In this state, time for the organism effectively stretches almost indefinitely. Researchers have recovered bacteria and simple microorganisms from Antarctic ice that appear to have remained viable after tens of thousands of years in frozen conditions. In controlled laboratory environments, some of these microbes have shown signs of metabolic recovery once carefully thawed. This does not mean complex animals are routinely being revived from deep ice. That is a common misconception. But at the microbial level, survival across extraordinary timescales is now well documented. One of the most important aspects of these findings is what they reveal about the limits of life. Traditional biology long assumed that sustained metabolic activity was required for long-term survival. Antarctic discoveries suggest that some organisms can instead shift into ultra-low energy survival modes that allow them to endure conditions once considered absolutely lethal. This has forced scientists to rethink the boundary between life, dormancy, and death. In extreme cold, the line is not always as clear as once believed. The implications extend far beyond Earth's polar regions. Astrobiologists now study Antarctic frozen microbes as analogs for potential life on icy worlds, such as Europa, Enceladus, and even subsurface regions of Mars. If microorganisms can persist for tens of thousands of years inside Antarctic ice, it becomes more plausible that life, past or present, could survive in similarly cold and isolated environments elsewhere in the solar system. Antarctica has effectively become a testing ground for understanding life at the edge of possibility. There is also a deeper philosophical dimension to these discoveries. Frozen organisms challenge our intuitive understanding of time and life cycles. Human life is measured in decades, civilizations in centuries. But some microbial life forms in Antarctic ice appear capable of spanning timescales that dwarf human history entirely. In the frozen layers beneath the continent, biological time moves differently, stretched, slowed, almost suspended. Even today, researchers believe we have only sampled a tiny fraction of what may exist within the Antarctic ice sheet and subglacial environments. Vast volumes of ancient ice remain undrilled, and each new core has the potential to reveal organisms adapted to conditions we are only beginning to understand. Antarctica continues to remind scientists of a humbling truth. Environments that appear completely lifeless at the surface may still be quietly preserving forms of life far below, waiting in a state that is neither fully alive nor truly gone. Lake Vostok is one of the most mysterious and scientifically important places on Earth, not because it is large, though it is enormous, but because it has been completely sealed beneath Antarctic ice for an almost unimaginable span of time. Hidden under roughly 4 kilometers of solid ice in East Antarctica, this vast freshwater lake existed in total darkness long before humans appeared on the planet. For decades, scientists did not even know it was there. Its discovery fundamentally changed how we understand Antarctica and forced researchers to rethink the limits of life in extreme environments. The lake was first detected in the late 20th century through ice-penetrating radar surveys conducted by Russian and international research teams. What appeared beneath the ice stunned the scientific community. Instead of solid frozen ground, the data revealed a liquid water body approximately 250 kilometers long and up to 50 kilometers wide. Lake Vostok is now considered one of the largest subglacial lakes in the world. Even more astonishing was the realization that it had likely been isolated from the surface for hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of years. In evolutionary terms, that is almost complete biological isolation. The reason Lake Vostok remains liquid despite the extreme Antarctic cold lies in pressure and geothermal heat. The immense weight of the overlying ice lowers the freezing point of the water, while heat from the Earth's interior provides just enough energy to keep the lake from freezing solid. The result is a dark, high-pressure aquatic environment unlike anything found on the surface of the continent. It is cold, oxygen-rich, and completely cut off from sunlight. From a biological standpoint, it resembles an alien world more than a typical Earth ecosystem. This is why Lake Vostok quickly became one of the most important targets for extreme environment research. Scientists began asking a profound question. If life exists in this sealed lake, how has it survived for so long in complete isolation? Direct exploration has been extremely cautious and technically difficult because researchers must avoid contaminating the pristine environment with modern microbes. Early ice samples taken from accreted lake water suggested the possible presence of microbial signatures, though the interpretation has remained carefully debated within the scientific community. Even without definitive proof of a complex ecosystem, Lake Vostok has already had enormous scientific impact. It has become a primary Earth analog for icy moons, such as Europa and Enceladus, where vast subsurface oceans are believed to exist beneath thick ice shells. If microbial life can survive in Lake Vostok's dark, pressurized environment, it strengthens the possibility that life could exist in similar extraterrestrial oceans. In this way, a hidden Antarctic lake has quietly become central to the modern search for life beyond Earth. Philosophically, Lake Vostok represents something deeply humbling. For most of human history, we assumed that the major frontiers of Earth had already been discovered and mapped. Yet beneath one of the most studied continents on the planet lay a massive hidden lake, completely unknown until very recently. It is a reminder that even in the 21st century, parts of our own world remain profoundly unexplored. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Lake Vostok is how little we still know. Direct sampling has only begun to scratch the surface. The lake's full ecosystem, water chemistry, and geological history remain only partially understood. Beneath 4 kilometers of silent Antarctic ice, an entire aquatic world has been waiting, untouched, unseen, and largely unchanged, for longer than human civilization has existed. Antarctica forces us into a rare kind of philosophical discomfort because it is one of the few places on Earth that still resists human narrative. Most of the planet has been mapped, named, owned, and explained. But beneath the Antarctic ice, we are repeatedly reminded that human knowledge still has edges. The deeper we drill, the more the continent quietly exposes a humbling truth. What we do not know is still vastly larger than what we do. From a scientific perspective, Antarctica is a climate archive, a biological frontier, and a geological puzzle. But from a philosophical perspective, it is something more unsettling. It is a mirror held up to human curiosity itself. For centuries, explorers risked starvation, isolation, and death to reach a place that offered no gold, no cities, and no obvious reward. The question is not only what they found. The deeper question is why they kept going. Humans have always been drawn toward the unknown, with a strange mixture of fear and attraction. Antarctica represents the purest form of that tension. It is hostile enough to repel us, yet mysterious enough to pull us forward. Psychologically, this reveals something important about our species. We are not driven only by survival or comfort. We are also driven by the need to reduce uncertainty, to push back the boundaries of the map, even when the practical benefit is unclear. The discoveries beneath the ice deepen this philosophical tension. Ancient air trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, microorganisms surviving in suspended time, hidden lakes sealed from sunlight, and meteorites older than Earth itself. Each finding carries the same quiet implication. The world is more layered than it appears on the surface. Reality contains more depth than our everyday perception suggests. Antarctica also challenges our sense of time. Human civilization measures history in centuries, sometimes millennia. Antarctic ice measures time in hundreds of thousands and even millions of years. When scientists extract an ice core, they are not just studying climate data. They are confronting the vast-scale mismatch between human experience and planetary history. Entire empires rose and fell, while the ice sheet above Lake Vostok slowly thickened year by year without interruption or awareness. There is also a philosophical lesson about control. Modern humanity often operates under the assumption that the natural world is largely understood and increasingly manageable. Yet Antarctica continues to resist full comprehension. Vast regions remain only partially mapped beneath the ice. Subglacial ecosystems operate on biological rules we are still deciphering. Even the long-term behavior of the ice sheet itself contains uncertainties that scientists continue to refine. The continent quietly reminds us that technological progress does not eliminate mystery. It often reveals deeper layers of it. Perhaps the most profound insight Antarctica offers is about patience and humility. The ice does not reveal its secrets quickly. Each core takes years to analyze. Each drilling operation requires extreme caution. Each discovery answers one question and raises several more. In an age defined by speed and instant information, Antarctica operates on geological time. It rewards persistence, not urgency. In the end, the philosophical weight of Antarctica is not only about what lies beneath the ice, it is about what the search itself reveals about us. A species capable of crossing oceans, building machines to drill through kilometers of frozen crust, and studying air trapped from prehistoric skies, is a species driven by something deeper than survival alone. Curiosity, discomfort with the unknown, and the quiet refusal to accept blank spaces on the map continue to push humanity forward. And Antarctica, perhaps more than any other place on Earth, reminds us of one enduring truth. The unknown has not disappeared. It has only moved to deeper, colder, and more silent places, waiting for the next question bold enough to reach it. The question of why humans seek the last frontiers is not really about geography. It is about something much deeper in the structure of the human mind. Across history, people have repeatedly pushed into environments that offered little comfort and enormous risk. Open oceans, polar ice, high mountains, deep space. Antarctica is simply the latest stage for a much older psychological pattern. The drive toward the unknown appears again and again, even when the practical reward is uncertain. This suggests the motive is not purely economic or strategic. It is partly biological, partly cognitive, and deeply philosophical. At the most basic level, humans evolved as exploratory creatures. Early survival favored those who were willing to move beyond familiar territory in search of food, safer shelter, or better climate conditions. Groups that explored cautiously but persistently often had access to new resources before their competitors. Over thousands of generations, this created a subtle selection pressure in favor of curiosity and calculated risk-taking. The modern explorer drilling Antarctic ice or planning missions to distant moons is operating with the same neural inheritance that once pushed small human groups across unknown landscapes. The environment has changed, but the underlying impulse has not disappeared. There is also a powerful cognitive factor. The human brain is deeply uncomfortable with incomplete maps. Uncertainty generates tension. Psychologically, blank spaces, whether on a map or in knowledge, create a kind of mental pressure. Exploration reduces that pressure. Each discovery replaces ambiguity with structure, and the brain finds this intrinsically rewarding. Neuroscientific studies suggest that curiosity activates many of the same reward pathways associated with tangible gains. In other words, learning what lies beyond the horizon is not just intellectually satisfying, it is neurologically reinforcing. The unknown pulls on the mind because resolving uncertainty feels good at a biological level. But biology and cognition alone do not fully explain the intensity of human frontier behavior. There is also a philosophical dimension tied to identity and meaning. Throughout history, frontier environments have functioned as stages where individuals and societies test their limits. Extreme places strip away comfort and expose capability in its rawest form. This is why polar exploration narratives from Amundsen and Scott to modern Antarctic researchers carry such psychological weight. The frontier is not only a place to discover new landscapes, it is a place where humans measure themselves against difficulty. In this sense, the search for the edge of the map is partly a search for the edge of the self. Fear plays an unexpected role as well. Humans are drawn to the unknown, not despite its danger, but partly because of it. Environments like Antarctica trigger a controlled confrontation with risk. When managed carefully, this produces a powerful mixture of anxiety and focus that many explorers describe as intensely clarifying. Psychologically, high-risk environments narrow attention and heighten awareness. For some individuals and cultures, this heightened state becomes deeply compelling. The frontier becomes not just a physical destination, but a mental state that feels more vivid than ordinary life. There is also a civilizational layer to the pattern. Societies that stop exploring often begin to feel strategically vulnerable. Throughout history, major powers have pushed outward partly from curiosity and partly from the fear of being left behind by competitors. Even Antarctica, officially demilitarized and governed by international treaty, reflects this dynamic in its dense network of research stations. Scientific presence often carries quiet geopolitical significance. The frontier, even in peaceful form, remains tied to long-term strategic thinking. Philosophically, the most interesting aspect of humanity's search for the final frontiers may be this: each time we reach what appears to be the edge moves. Antarctica was once the last unknown continent. Now attention turns to the deep ocean, to subsurface Mars, to the icy oceans of Europa. The pattern suggests that the human relationship with the unknown is not a problem to be solved once and finished. It is a permanent feature of the species. As long as uncertainty exists somewhere, some portion of humanity will feel pulled toward it. In the end, humans search for the last frontiers because curiosity, discomfort with uncertainty, and the need to test limits are built deeply into the architecture of the mind. Antarctica did not create this drive. It simply revealed it in one of its purest modern forms. The psychological pull toward the unknown is one of the most persistent and least understood forces in human behavior. On the surface, it seems irrational. Unknown environments are historically dangerous. Uncertainty increases risk. From a purely survival-based perspective, humans should prefer the familiar and avoid the unpredictable. And yet, across thousands of years, people have repeatedly done the opposite. They have crossed oceans without maps, climbed mountains without knowing what lay beyond the ridge, and drilled into Antarctic ice not because it was safe, but because it was unknown. This tension reveals something fundamental about the human mind. At the biological level, the brain is built to constantly predict its environment. Prediction reduces danger. Familiarity lowers cognitive load. But when the brain encounters uncertainty, something interesting happens. Instead of responding only with fear, the human nervous system often produces a mixed signal, anxiety combined with curiosity. Neuroscientists sometimes describe this as an approach-avoidance conflict. Part of the brain signals caution, while another part signals interest. It is precisely this internal tension that creates the psychological pull toward the unknown. The unknown is threatening enough to activate attention, but intriguing enough to prevent total withdrawal. Dopamine plays an important role in this process. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine is not simply a reward chemical. It is strongly involved in anticipation and information seeking. When humans detect a gap in knowledge, a mystery, a hidden place, an unanswered question, dopaminergic systems in the brain can activate in ways similar to when we anticipate tangible rewards. In simple terms, the brain often treats new information itself as a kind of reward. This helps explain why explorers, scientists, and even ordinary individuals can feel a powerful internal drive to resolve uncertainty, even when no immediate practical benefit exists. There is also a cognitive narrative component. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We do not like incomplete stories. The unknown represents an unfinished narrative, a loose thread in the mental fabric of how we understand the world. Antarctica, deep oceans, distant planets, all of these function psychologically as open loops, and open loops create mental tension. Exploration, discovery, and explanation close those loops, at least temporarily. This is why each discovery often brings satisfaction, followed by a new question. The mind stabilizes briefly, then begins searching again. Fear and attraction toward the unknown are not opposites. They are partners. Moderate uncertainty sharpens attention and increases focus. Environments that are too predictable become cognitively dull, while environments that are overwhelmingly chaotic trigger avoidance. The unknown sits in a psychologically powerful middle zone. It is risky enough to stimulate alertness, but structured enough to remain potentially understandable. Antarctica exemplifies this perfectly. It is dangerous, but not completely random. It is hostile, but still scientifically interpretable. That balance makes it deeply compelling to the human mind. Culturally, societies often amplify this biological tendency. Exploration becomes associated with prestige, progress, and identity. Nations celebrate explorers. Scientific communities reward discovery. Stories of frontier crossing become embedded in education and media. Over time, the psychological pull toward the unknown becomes reinforced not only internally but socially. What begins as individual curiosity evolves into collective momentum. Philosophically, the most striking insight is that the unknown does not simply exist outside us. It activates something already present within us. The same environment that one person experiences as terrifying emptiness, another experiences as irresistible mystery. The difference is not only in the environment, it is in the human response system interpreting it. In the end, the psychological pull toward the unknown is not a flaw in human reasoning. It is an adaptive tension built into the species, a balance between caution and curiosity that has repeatedly pushed humanity beyond the boundaries of the familiar world. Antarctica, perhaps more clearly than any other place on Earth, simply exposes this ancient mental circuitry in action. Ice is often described scientifically as frozen water, but philosophically it behaves much more like a time capsule. Nowhere is this more evident than in Antarctica, where layer upon layer of compacted snowfall has quietly preserved fragments of Earth's past with extraordinary precision. Unlike most environments where wind, water, and biological activity constantly erase older traces, Antarctic ice does something rare. It protects information by slowing time's visible effects. In this sense, the ice sheet is not just part of the climate system. It is a vast chronological archive. Each year, new snow falls and settles over the continent. At first, it is light and porous, but as additional layers accumulate above, pressure slowly compresses the older snow beneath. Over decades and centuries, this material transforms into dense glacial ice, sealing within it tiny air bubbles, dust particles, volcanic ash, and chemical signatures from the atmosphere of that specific year. The process is slow, quiet, and remarkably consistent. Nothing dramatic announces it. Yet over hundreds of thousands of years, this steady accumulation has built one of the most detailed natural records on the planet. What makes ice behave like a time capsule is its stability. In warmer, more active environments, organic material decays, chemical signals diffuse, and physical layers become disturbed. Antarctica's extreme cold and relative dryness suppress many of these processes. Biological activity is minimal. Liquid water movement is limited. As a result, the layers remain unusually well ordered. Scientists drilling deep ice cores can often read the sequence almost like pages in a vertical book, moving backward through time meter by meter. Inside these frozen layers are snapshots of ancient worlds. Air bubbles preserve the actual composition of prehistoric atmospheres, allowing researchers to measure carbon dioxide and methane levels from tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago. Isotope ratios in the ice itself reveal past temperatures. Dust particles indicate ancient wind patterns and distant droughts. Even major volcanic eruptions leave thin ash signatures that can be matched across continents. Few other natural archives combine this many independent signals in a single continuous record. The philosophical weight of this is easy to overlook. Human civilization tends to think of memory as fragile and easily lost. Empires collapse, cities erode, written records burn or decay. Yet beneath Antarctica, the planet has been quietly storing its own environmental memory far longer than humans have existed to interpret it. The ice does not remember intentionally, but its physical structure preserves the past with a kind of indifferent fidelity. There is also a deeper lesson about time itself. Human experience measures time in years and generations. Ice measures it in accumulation and compression. A century to us is only a thin layer in a deep Antarctic core. Entire chapters of human history occupy what, in the ice, appears as a narrow band. This scale difference can be psychologically disorienting. It reminds us that the rhythms of the planet operate on timelines far larger than everyday human intuition. At the same time, ice as a time capsule is not perfectly permanent. It preserves, but it also moves. Glaciers flow slowly, ice sheets deform. In some regions, older layers are eventually pushed deeper or lost at the margins. This introduces another philosophical nuance. Even the best natural archives are not eternal. They are temporary windows, open only as long as environmental conditions allow. The effort to study Antarctic ice is therefore partly a race against time itself. In the end, calling Antarctic ice a time capsule is not just poetic language. It is scientifically accurate in a very literal sense. Beneath the frozen surface lies a layered record of atmospheres, climates, and environmental events, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. And perhaps the most humbling realization is this: while human history was unfolding on the surface, the planet was quietly recording everything in ice, waiting for a species curious enough to finally read what had been preserved. The metaphor of memory freezing is powerful because it captures something deeply human about how the mind handles time, trauma, and identity. Just as Antarctic ice preserves ancient air and particles in suspended stillness, the human mind is also capable of placing certain experiences into a kind of psychological cold storage. Not erased, not fully active, but held in a state where time seems to stop around them. Memory, like ice, does not always disappear. Sometimes it simply becomes inaccessible beneath layers of later experience. In everyday life, we tend to imagine memory as fluid and continuously evolving. But under strong emotional pressure, the brain often does the opposite. Intense experiences, especially those linked to fear, shock, or overwhelming stress, can become highly stable in the neural system. Instead of fading quickly, they remain sharply preserved, sometimes for decades. Psychologists often observe that emotionally charged memories feel less like distant history and more like frozen moments that can be reactivated with surprising clarity. In this sense, the mind behaves less like flowing water and more like stratified ice. The metaphor becomes even more striking when we consider how these memories are stored. Just as layers of snow gradually bury older Antarctic ice deeper beneath the surface, new experiences in life accumulate over earlier ones. Most of the time, this layering helps us move forward, but occasionally something triggers the release of what was long buried. A smell, a place, a fragment of sound, and suddenly the past surfaces with unexpected vividness. What appeared distant reveals itself to have been quietly preserved all along. There is also a protective function embedded in this process. In extreme environments, Antarctic ice preserves because cold slows chemical breakdown. In psychological terms, the mind sometimes freezes certain memories because full emotional processing at the moment of experience would be too overwhelming. By reducing immediate emotional access, the brain maintains functional stability in the present. The memory is not destroyed, it is stabilized. From an evolutionary perspective, this may have allowed humans to continue functioning after shock or trauma, rather than becoming completely incapacitated. But frozen memory carries a paradox. Preservation prevents loss, yet it can also prevent integration. Ice cores hold ancient air perfectly, but the air inside remains part of the past until scientists deliberately extract and analyze it. Similarly, unprocessed memories can remain sharply intact, but psychologically distant from conscious understanding. They are remembered in fragments of sensation or emotion rather than fully integrated narrative. This is why certain past experiences can feel strangely immediate even after many years have passed. Time moved forward, but part of the memory did not fully move with it. Philosophically, the metaphor of frozen memory also challenges the comforting idea that time automatically heals all experiences. Time often softens memory, but not always. Under the right emotional conditions, the human mind is capable of extraordinary preservation. In some cases, what fades is not the memory itself, but our awareness of how strongly it is still stored beneath the surface layers of daily life. Antarctica offers a physical mirror of this psychological reality. Beneath kilometers of ice lie intact records of atmospheres and events from ages long past. The surface looks empty and calm, yet below it the past remains physically present. The human mind operates in a surprisingly similar way. Most of the time we move forward, accumulating new experiences, building new narratives. But beneath the surface, certain moments remain suspended, held in a quiet state of preservation that time alone does not fully erase. In the end, the metaphor of memory freezing reminds us that forgetting and losing are not the same thing. Some things disappear, others simply become buried, waiting like ancient air in Antarctic ice, for the right moment to be released back into awareness. Millennia frozen bacteria are one of the most quietly shocking discoveries hidden inside Antarctic ice. because they challenge a very old human assumption that extreme cold simply ends life. For a long time, scientists believed that anything trapped in deep ice for tens of thousands of years would be biologically finished. But careful research in polar ice cores and subglacial environments has revealed something far more complex. In certain cases, the ice did not kill these microorganisms. It slowed them almost to stillness. The key is the concept of dormancy under extreme cold. When temperatures drop far below freezing and conditions remain stable for very long periods, some bacteria can enter a state known as cryptobiosis, or ultra-low metabolic dormancy. In this condition, cellular activity becomes so slow that it is nearly undetectable. The organism is not actively growing or reproducing, but its internal structures remain intact enough to potentially resume activity if conditions improve. In simple terms, biological time for these microbes stretches dramatically compared to normal life. Researchers studying deep Antarctic ice cores have recovered bacterial cells from layers tens of thousands of years old, and in some cases, even older. Under carefully controlled laboratory conditions, certain microbes have shown signs of metabolic recovery after being thawed. This does not mean complex organisms can be easily revived from deep ice, and most frozen cells do not survive intact. But the confirmed survival of even some microbial life across such long timescales was enough to force scientists to rethink the limits of biology. One reason Antarctica is uniquely suited to preserve these microorganisms is environmental stability. The continent is not only extremely cold, but also very dry and relatively undisturbed. There is little liquid water movement, minimal biological competition, and very slow chemical degradation compared to warmer environments. These conditions act like a natural deep freezer, operating continuously for geological timescales. In many parts of the world, microbes would be destroyed by temperature fluctuations or chemical processes long before reaching such ages. The discovery of millennia frozen bacteria has had major implications beyond polar science. Astrobiologists now study these organisms as analogs for possible life in icy extraterrestrial environments. Moons such as Europa and Enceladus contain thick ice shells over subsurface oceans. If microorganisms on Earth can remain viable after tens of thousands of years in Antarctic ice, it becomes more plausible that microbial life could persist in similarly cold and isolated environments elsewhere in the solar system. Antarctica has effectively become a testing ground for understanding life at the edge of survival. There is also a philosophical dimension that is difficult to ignore. Human lifespans are measured in decades, civilizations in centuries. Yet some microbial life forms appear capable of enduring across timescales that dwarf human history entirely, not through active survival in the usual sense, but through extreme metabolic slowdown. In the frozen layers beneath Antarctica, life does not always stop. Sometimes it simply waits. Even today, scientists believe we have only sampled a small fraction of the microorganisms preserved within Antarctic ice. Vast regions remain undrilled, and each new deep core has the potential to reveal additional forms of cold-adapted life. What Antarctica has already shown is humbling enough. The boundary between life and suspension is far more flexible than earlier generations of scientists once believed. Millennia frozen bacteria are one of the most quietly shocking discoveries hidden inside Antarctic ice because they challenge a very old human assumption that extreme cold simply ends life. For a long time, scientists believed that anything trapped in deep ice for tens of thousands of years would be biologically finished. But careful research in polar ice cores and subglacial environments has revealed something far more complex. In certain cases, the ice did not kill these microorganisms. It slowed them almost to stillness. The key is the concept of dormancy under extreme cold. When temperatures drop far below freezing and conditions remain stable for very long periods, some bacteria can enter a state known as cryptobiosis, or ultra-low metabolic dormancy. In this condition, cellular activity becomes so slow that it is nearly undetectable. The organism is not actively growing or reproducing, but its internal structures remain intact enough to potentially resume activity if conditions improve. In simple terms, biological time for these microbes stretches dramatically compared to normal life. Researchers studying deep Antarctic ice cores have recovered bacterial cells from layers tens of thousands of years old, and in some cases, even older. Under carefully controlled laboratory conditions, certain microbes have shown signs of metabolic recovery after being thawed. This does not mean complex organisms can be easily revived from deep ice, and most frozen cells do not survive intact. But the confirmed survival of even some microbial life across such long timescales was enough to force scientists to rethink the limits of biology. One reason Antarctica is uniquely suited to preserve these microorganisms is environmental stability. The continent is not only extremely cold, but also very dry and relatively undisturbed. There is little liquid water movement, minimal biological competition, and very slow chemical degradation compared to warmer environments. These conditions act like a natural deep freezer, operating continuously for geological timescales. In many parts of the world, microbes would be destroyed by temperature fluctuations or chemical processes long before reaching such ages. The discovery of millennia frozen bacteria has had major implications beyond polar science. Astrobiologists now study these organisms as analogs for possible life in icy extraterrestrial environments. Moons such as Europa and Enceladus contain thick ice shells over subsurface oceans. If microorganisms on Earth can remain viable after tens of thousands of years in Antarctic ice, it becomes more plausible that microbial life could persist in similarly cold and isolated environments elsewhere in the solar system. Antarctica has effectively become a testing ground for understanding life at the edge of survival. There is also a philosophical dimension that is difficult to ignore. Human lifespans are measured in decades, civilizations in centuries. Yet some microbial life forms appear capable of enduring across timescales that dwarf human history entirely, not through active survival in the usual sense, but through extreme metabolic slowdown. In the frozen layers beneath Antarctica, life does not always stop. Sometimes it simply waits. Even today, scientists believe we have only sampled a small fraction of the microorganisms preserved within Antarctic ice. Vast regions remain undrilled, and each new deep core has the potential to reveal additional forms of cold-adapted life. What Antarctica has already shown is humbling enough. The boundary between life and suspension is far more flexible than earlier generations of scientists once believed. Amundsen versus Scott is one of the most psychologically revealing rivalries in exploration history because it was never simply a race across ice. It was a collision between two different philosophies of risk, planning, and human limits. Both men aimed for the same point on the map, the South Pole, but the way they approached the unknown could not have been more different. In the end, the ice did not just test their endurance. It exposed the consequences of strategic mindset under extreme conditions. Roald Amundsen approached Antarctica like a problem to be solved with precision. Before even committing fully to the South Pole attempt, he spent years studying Arctic survival techniques. He learned from Inuit methods. He trusted dogs over experimental machines. He optimized clothing, sled weight, food rations, and route planning with almost surgical discipline. For Amundsen, the polar environment was not something to heroically endure. It was something to intelligently adapt to. His philosophy was simple but ruthless. Remove unnecessary risk wherever possible. Robert Falcon Scott approached the expedition from a different cultural and psychological tradition. He was a naval officer shaped partly by the British heroic exploration ethos of the early 20th century. Scott's expedition had broader scientific goals, and his transport strategy was more complex and, in hindsight, more fragile. He used a combination of motor sledges, ponies, and man-hauling. Some of these systems failed early in the journey, forcing the team to rely more heavily on human physical endurance than originally planned. Scott was not careless, but his approach carried more structural risk in an environment that punished inefficiency brutally. The difference became decisive as both expeditions pushed southward. Amundsen's team moved with remarkable efficiency across the ice. Their dogs performed reliably. Their depot placement was precise. Their equipment functioned as expected. On December 14, 1911, Amundsen and his team reached the South Pole and planted the Norwegian flag in the silent Antarctic interior. Their return journey, though still harsh, remained controlled and ultimately successful. Scott's team arrived weeks later on January 17, 1912, only to find Amundsen's tent already standing in the frozen emptiness. The psychological impact was devastating, but the real tragedy unfolded on the return journey. Exhaustion, extreme cold, dwindling supplies, and worsening physical condition gradually overwhelmed the British team. One by one, Scott and his companions perished on the ice, not far from supply depots that might have saved them under slightly different circumstances. From a purely operational perspective, the contrast is stark. Amundsen treated Antarctica as an engineering problem. Scott treated it partly as a test of endurance and imperial duty. The environment rewarded one approach and punished the other. Yet the deeper lesson is not simply about who was more skilled. It is about how different mental models interact with extreme environments. Philosophically, the Amundsen-Scott story reveals something enduring about human behavior under uncertainty. Success in extreme conditions rarely goes to the boldest or the most heroic in the romantic sense. It often goes to the side that reduces friction, respects the environment, and removes avoidable variables. Antarctica is indifferent to narrative. It responds only to physics, preparation, and adaptation. At the same time, Scott's story continues to resonate emotionally in a way that pure success stories sometimes do not. His journals, recovered from the ice, reveal a leader fully aware of the situation deteriorating around him, yet determined to document the experience with clarity and composure until the end. In this sense, the rivalry also exposes two different human responses to the unknown. One focused on optimization and survival, the other intertwined with endurance, meaning, and legacy. More than a century later, Amundsen versus Scott remains powerful, not because it was simply a race, but because it demonstrates how thin the margin can be between mastery and catastrophe in extreme environments. Antarctica did not change between the two expeditions. The ice, the cold, and the distance were the same. What differed was the interaction between human decision-making and an environment that does not forgive inefficiency. James Cook. James Cook occupies a unique place in the story of Antarctica, not because he discovered the continent. He never actually saw its mainland, but because he was the first to seriously challenge the great southern mystery with disciplined exploration rather than speculation. Before Cook, Antarctica was largely an idea on maps, the so-called Terra Australis Incognita that many European geographers believed must exist to balance the northern continents. It was drawn confidently, but it was not known. Cook was the man who began turning that myth into a measurable question. In the 1770s, during his second great voyage, Cook pushed farther south than any navigator in recorded history. His ships, Resolution and Adventure, entered waters that earlier sailors had avoided or barely touched. In January 1773, Cook achieved something unprecedented. He crossed the Antarctic Circle. This was not a symbolic milestone at the time. It was a physical and psychological barrier. Beyond it lay seas choked with pack ice, violent storms and temperatures that made prolonged navigation extremely dangerous for wooden sailing vessels. What makes Cook especially important is not just how far he traveled, but how he thought. Unlike many earlier explorers who were guided partly by hopeful speculation about rich southern lands, Cook approached the problem empirically. He carefully mapped coastlines, recorded ice conditions, and observed the environment with scientific discipline. Again and again, he encountered thick, seemingly impenetrable ice fields that blocked further southern progress. These were not occasional obstacles. They formed what appeared to be a defensive ring around whatever lay deeper in the polar region. After repeated attempts to penetrate farther south, Cook reached a sober conclusion. If a southern continent existed, he argued, it was likely buried beneath ice and located so far into the polar region that it would be of little practical value for trade or colonization. This judgment had enormous influence. For decades after Cook's voyage, enthusiasm for southern exploration cooled significantly. In a sense, Cook did not discover Antarctica, but he demonstrated just how effectively it was hidden. There is also a philosophical dimension to Cook's role. He represents a turning point between the age of speculative geography and the age of measured exploration. Before Cook, blank spaces on maps were often filled with confident imagination. After Cook, serious explorers increasingly demanded observational proof. His voyages helped shift exploration from myth-driven expansion to data-driven investigation. Antarctica, in this sense, became not just a remote place, but a scientific problem. Psychologically, Cook also demonstrated something important about the limits of even the most skilled explorers. He was disciplined, methodical, and remarkably capable at sea. Yet even he was forced to stop by environmental barriers he could not safely overcome with 18th century technology. Antarctica did not yield to courage alone. It required tools and knowledge that would not fully arrive until the 19th and 20th centuries. In the end, James Cook's legacy in the Antarctic story is subtle but foundational. He was the first to seriously probe the southern ice barrier and return with evidence strong enough to reshape European expectations. He did not reveal the continent, but he stripped away the comforting fantasy that it would be easily reached or easily exploited. In doing so, he transformed Antarctica from a hopeful geographical rumor into one of the most formidable and scientifically intriguing frontiers on Earth. The ice has not spoken yet. For centuries, Antarctica looked silent from the outside, an endless white emptiness at the bottom of the world. Early explorers believed that once the map was filled in, the mystery would fade. But the opposite happened. The more we drilled, scanned, and measured, the more the continent revealed how much of its story remains locked beneath the surface. Antarctica was never truly empty. It was simply quiet. Layer by layer, the ice continues to hold records older than human memory. Ancient air still sleeps inside microscopic bubbles. Microbial life waits in suspended time beneath kilometers of frozen pressure. Subglacial lakes remain sealed in total darkness, cut off from sunlight for spans longer than civilization itself. Even fragments of distant asteroids lie preserved on the surface, protected by the coldest environment on Earth. Each discovery has answered important questions, but each has also exposed deeper uncertainties. What makes Antarctica philosophically unsettling is not only what we have found, but how much still remains beyond our reach. Vast regions beneath the ice sheet are only partially mapped. Some subglacial environments have never been directly sampled. The behavior of the deep ice over long time scales still contains unknowns that scientists continue to refine. In an age where humanity often assumes the planet is fully known, Antarctica quietly refuses that assumption. The ice moves slowly, but it is not static. Glaciers flow, layers compress. Hidden landscapes shift over geological time. What appears frozen in place is actually part of a long, patient process, unfolding far beyond the pace of human observation. This creates a strange tension. Antarctica feels timeless, yet it is constantly changing in ways that are almost invisible in the short term. There is also a deeper human lesson in this silence. Modern civilization is built on speed. Fast data, fast travel, fast answers. Antarctica operates on the opposite rhythm. It reveals its secrets reluctantly and only through sustained patience. Each deep ice core takes years to analyze. Each clean drill into a subglacial lake requires extreme caution to avoid contamination. Each new map of the buried landscape replaces one mystery with several more. The continent does not reward urgency, it rewards persistence. Perhaps that is why the idea that the ice has not spoken yet carries such weight. It reminds us that discovery is not a finished chapter. Even now, with satellites in orbit and advanced sensors scanning the polar plateau, humanity is still only beginning to understand what Antarctica contains. The continent remains one of the last places on Earth where the boundary between knowledge and mystery is still clearly visible. In the end, the silence of the Antarctic ice is not emptiness. It is unfinished information. Beneath the frozen surface lies a record of climates, ecosystems, and planetary history that is still being decoded piece by piece. And if history has taught us anything about Antarctica, it is this. Every time we believe we have reached the final answer, the ice reveals another question waiting underneath. The ice has not spoken yet, and that may be the most important discovery of all. The ice has not spoken yet. For centuries, Antarctica looked silent from the outside, an endless white emptiness at the bottom of the world. Early explorers believed that once the map was filled in, the mystery would fade. But the opposite happened. The more we drilled, scanned, and measured, the more the continent revealed how much of its story remains locked beneath the surface. Antarctica was never truly empty. It was simply quiet. Layer by layer, the ice continues to hold records older than human memory. Ancient air still sleeps inside microscopic bubbles. Microbial life waits in suspended time beneath kilometers of frozen pressure. Subglacial lakes remain sealed in total darkness, cut off from sunlight for spans longer than civilization itself. Even fragments of distant asteroids lie preserved on the surface, protected by the coldest environment on Earth. Each discovery has answered important questions, but each has also exposed deeper uncertainties. What makes Antarctica philosophically unsettling is not only what we have found, but how much still remains beyond our reach. Vast regions beneath the ice sheet are only partially mapped. Some subglacial environments have never been directly sampled. The behavior of the deep ice over long time scales still contains unknowns that scientists continue to refine. In an age where humanity often assumes the planet is fully known, Antarctica quietly refuses that assumption. The ice moves slowly, but it is not static. Glaciers flow, layers compress. Hidden landscapes shift over geological time. What appears frozen in place is actually part of a long, patient process, unfolding far beyond the pace of human observation. This creates a strange tension. Antarctica feels timeless, yet it is constantly changing in ways that are almost invisible in the short term. There is also a deeper human lesson in this silence. Modern civilization is built on speed. Fast data, fast travel, fast answers. Antarctica operates on the opposite rhythm. It reveals its secrets reluctantly and only through sustained patience. Each deep ice core takes years to analyze. Each clean drill into a subglacial lake requires extreme caution to avoid contamination. Each new map of the buried landscape replaces one mystery with several more. The continent does not reward urgency, it rewards persistence. Perhaps that is why the idea that the ice has not spoken yet carries such weight. It reminds us that discovery is not a finished chapter. Even now, with satellites in orbit and advanced sensors scanning the polar plateau, humanity is still only beginning to understand what Antarctica contains. The continent remains one of the last places on Earth where the boundary between knowledge and mystery is still clearly visible. In the end, the silence of the Antarctic ice is not emptiness, it is unfinished information. Beneath the frozen surface lies a record of climates, ecosystems, and planetary history that is still being decoded piece by piece. And if history has taught us anything about Antarctica, it is this. Every time we believe we have reached the final answer, the ice reveals another question waiting underneath. The ice has not spoken yet, and that may be the most important discovery of all. The ice has not spoken yet. For centuries, Antarctica looked silent from the outside, an endless white emptiness at the bottom of the world. Early explorers believed that once the map was filled in, the mystery would fade. But the opposite happened. The more we drilled, scanned, and measured, the more the continent revealed how much of its story remains locked beneath the surface. Antarctica was never truly empty. It was simply quiet. Layer by layer, the ice continues to hold records older than human memory. Ancient air still sleeps inside microscopic bubbles. Microbial life waits in suspended time beneath kilometers of frozen pressure. Subglacial lakes remain sealed in total darkness, cut off from sunlight for spans longer than civilization itself. Even fragments of distant asteroids lie preserved on the surface, protected by the coldest environment on Earth. Each discovery has answered important questions, but each has also exposed deeper uncertainties. What makes Antarctica philosophically unsettling is not only what we have found, but how much still remains beyond our reach. Vast regions beneath the ice sheet are only partially mapped. Some subglacial environments have never been directly sampled. The behavior of the deep ice over long time scales still contains unknowns that scientists continue to refine. In an age where humanity often assumes the planet is fully known, Antarctica quietly refuses that assumption. The ice moves slowly, but it is not static. Glaciers flow, layers compress. Hidden landscapes shift over geological time. What appears frozen in place is actually part of a long, patient process, unfolding far beyond the pace of human observation. This creates a strange tension. Antarctica feels timeless, yet it is constantly changing in ways that are almost invisible in the short term. There is also a deeper human lesson in this silence. Modern civilization is built on speed. Fast data, fast travel, fast answers. Antarctica operates on the opposite rhythm. It reveals its secrets reluctantly and only through sustained patience. Each deep ice core takes years to analyze. Each clean drill into a subglacial lake requires extreme caution to avoid contamination. Each new map of the buried landscape replaces one mystery with several more. The continent does not reward urgency, it rewards persistence. Perhaps that is why the idea that the ice has not spoken yet carries such weight. It reminds us that discovery is not a finished chapter. Even now, with satellites in orbit and advanced sensors scanning the polar plateau, humanity is still only beginning to understand what Antarctica contains. The continent remains one of the last places on Earth where the boundary between knowledge and mystery is still clearly visible. In the end, the silence of the Antarctic ice is not emptiness. It is unfinished information. Beneath the frozen surface lies a record of climates, ecosystems, and planetary history that is still being decoded piece by piece. And if history has taught us anything about Antarctica, it is this. Every time we believe we have reached the final answer, the ice reveals another question waiting underneath. The ice has not spoken yet, and that may be the most important discovery of all. The ice has not spoken yet. For centuries, Antarctica looked silent from the outside, an endless white emptiness at the bottom of the world. Early explorers believed that once the map was filled in, the mystery would fade. But the opposite happened. The more we drilled, scanned, and measured, the more the continent revealed how much of its story remains locked beneath the surface. Antarctica was never truly empty. It was simply quiet. Layer by layer, the ice continues to hold records older than human memory. Ancient air still sleeps inside microscopic bubbles. Microbial life waits in suspended time beneath kilometers of frozen pressure. Subglacial lakes remain sealed in total darkness, cut off from sunlight for spans longer than civilization itself. Even fragments of distant asteroids lie preserved on the surface, protected by the coldest environment on Earth. Each discovery has answered important questions, but each has also exposed deeper uncertainties. What makes Antarctica philosophically unsettling is not only what we have found, but how much still remains beyond our reach. Vast regions beneath the ice sheet are only partially mapped. Some subglacial environments have never been directly sampled. The behavior of the deep ice over long time scales still contains unknowns that scientists continue to refine. In an age where humanity often assumes the planet is fully known, Antarctica quietly refuses that assumption. The ice moves slowly, but it is not static. Glaciers flow, layers compress. Hidden landscapes shift over geological time. What appears frozen in place is actually part of a long, patient process, unfolding far beyond the pace of human observation. This creates a strange tension. Antarctica feels timeless, yet it is constantly changing in ways that are almost invisible in the short term. There is also a deeper human lesson in this silence. Modern civilization is built on speed. Fast data, fast travel, fast answers. Antarctica operates on the opposite rhythm. It reveals its secrets reluctantly and only through sustained patience. Each deep ice core takes years to analyze. Each clean drill into a subglacial lake requires extreme caution to avoid contamination. Each new map of the buried landscape replaces one mystery with several more. The continent does not reward urgency. It rewards persistence. Perhaps that is why the idea that the ice has not spoken yet carries such weight. It reminds us that discovery is not a finished chapter. Even now, with satellites in orbit and advanced sensors scanning the polar plateau, humanity is still only beginning to understand what Antarctica contains. The continent remains one of the last places on Earth where the boundary between knowledge and mystery is still clearly visible. In the end, the silence of the Antarctic ice is not emptiness. It is unfinished information. Beneath the frozen surface lies a record of climates, ecosystems, and planetary history that is still being decoded piece by piece. And if history has taught us anything about Antarctica, it is this. Every time we believe we have reached the final answer, the ice reveals another question waiting underneath. The ice has not spoken yet, and that may be the most important discovery of all. The ice has not spoken yet. For centuries, Antarctica looked silent from the outside, an endless white emptiness at the bottom of the world. Early explorers believed that once the map was filled in, the mystery would fade. But the opposite happened. The more we drilled, scanned, and measured, the more the continent revealed how much of its story remains locked beneath the surface. Antarctica was never truly empty. It was simply quiet. Layer by layer, the ice continues to hold records older than human memory. Ancient air still sleeps inside microscopic bubbles. Microbial life waits in suspended time beneath kilometers of frozen pressure. Subglacial lakes remain sealed in total darkness, cut off from sunlight for spans longer than civilization itself. Even fragments of distant asteroids lie preserved on the surface, protected by the coldest environment on Earth. Each discovery has answered important questions, but each has also exposed deeper uncertainties. What makes Antarctica philosophically unsettling is not only what we have found, but how much still remains beyond our reach. Vast regions beneath the ice sheet are only partially mapped. Some subglacial environments have never been directly sampled. The behavior of the deep ice over long time scales still contains unknowns that scientists continue to refine. In an age where humanity often assumes the planet is fully known, Antarctica quietly refuses that assumption. The ice moves slowly, but it is not static. Glaciers flow, layers compress. Hidden landscapes shift over geological time. What appears frozen in place is actually part of a long, patient process, unfolding far beyond the pace of human observation. This creates a strange tension. Antarctica feels timeless, yet it is constantly changing in ways that are almost invisible in the short term. There is also a deeper human lesson in this silence. Modern civilization is built on speed. Fast data, fast travel, fast answers. Antarctica operates on the opposite rhythm. It reveals its secrets reluctantly and only through sustained patience. Each deep ice core takes years to analyze. Each clean drill into a subglacial lake requires extreme caution to avoid contamination. Each new map of the buried landscape replaces one mystery with several more. The continent does not reward urgency, it rewards persistence. Perhaps that is why the idea that the ice has not spoken yet carries such weight. It reminds us that discovery is not a finished chapter. Even now, with satellites in orbit and advanced sensors scanning the polar plateau, humanity is still only beginning to understand what Antarctica contains. The continent remains one of the last places on Earth where the boundary between knowledge and mystery is still clearly visible. In the end, the silence of the Antarctic ice is not emptiness. It is unfinished information. Beneath the frozen surface lies a record of climates, ecosystems, and planetary history that is still being decoded piece by piece. And if history has taught us anything about Antarctica, it is this. Every time we believe we have reached the final answer, the ice reveals another question waiting underneath. The ice has not spoken yet, and that may be the most important discovery of all. Antarctica is often described as the last great wilderness on Earth, but after everything we have seen, it is clear that it is something more profound than that. It is not simply a frozen continent at the bottom of the world. It is a slow archive of planetary memory, a biological frontier, and a quiet reminder of how much of our own world still remains beyond complete understanding. From ancient air bubbles and millennia frozen bacteria to hidden lakes and meteorites, older than Earth itself, the pattern is unmistakable. The deeper we look into the ice, the more we are forced to confront the scale of what we still do not know. What makes this story powerful is not only the science, it is the reflection it offers about human nature. Again and again, we have pushed toward the coldest, darkest, most isolated places on the planet, not because they were easy, but because they were unknown. The same psychological pull that drove the earliest explorers across unmapped oceans now drives drills deep into Antarctic ice and probes toward distant icy moons. The frontier has moved, but the human impulse behind it has remained remarkably consistent. Antarctica teaches a quiet form of humility. It reminds us that technological progress does not eliminate mystery. It often reveals deeper layers of it. Even now, vast regions beneath the ice sheet remain only partially explored. Entire ecosystems may still operate in sealed darkness. Climate records stretching further back in time may still lie buried beyond the reach of current drilling. The continent continues to resist full comprehension, and in doing so, it preserves one of the most valuable scientific and philosophical lessons available to us. We are still early in the story. As long as the ice continues to hold unanswered questions, there will be people willing to cross the cold, study the layers, and listen carefully to what the frozen record is trying to tell us. Because the most important discoveries are rarely the ones we expect to find. They are the ones waiting quietly in places we once believed were empty. If this journey into the hidden world beneath Antarctica sparked your curiosity, subscribe to the Enigmatic Veil for more deep explorations of history, science, and the psychology behind humanity's greatest frontiers. Here, we do not just follow the map, we follow the questions that still remain. Antarctica is often described as the last great wilderness on Earth, but after everything we have seen, it is clear that it is something more profound than that. It is not simply a frozen continent at the bottom of the world. It is a slow archive of planetary memory, a biological frontier, and a quiet reminder of how much of our own world still remains beyond complete understanding. From ancient air bubbles and millennia frozen bacteria to hidden lakes and meteorites older than Earth itself, the pattern is unmistakable. The deeper we look into the ice, the more we are forced to confront the scale of what we still do not know. What makes this story powerful is not only the science, it is the reflection it offers about human nature. Again and again, we have pushed toward the coldest, darkest, most isolated places on the planet, not because they were easy, but because they were unknown. The same psychological pull that drove the earliest explorers across unmapped oceans now drives drills deep into Antarctic ice and probes toward distant icy moons. The frontier has moved, but the human impulse behind it has remained remarkably consistent. Antarctica teaches a quiet form of humility. It reminds us that technological progress does not eliminate mystery. It often reveals deeper layers of it. Even now, vast regions beneath the ice sheet remain only partially explored. Entire ecosystems may still operate in sealed darkness. Climate records stretching further back in time may still lie buried beyond the reach of current drilling. The continent continues to resist full comprehension, and in doing so, it preserves one of the most valuable scientific and philosophical lessons available to us. We are still early in the story. As long as the ice continues to hold unanswered questions, there will be people willing to cross the cold, study the layers, and listen carefully to what the frozen record is trying to tell us. Because the most important discoveries are rarely the ones we expect to find. They are the ones waiting quietly in places we once believed were empty. If this journey into the hidden world beneath Antarctica sparked your curiosity, subscribe to the Enigmatic Veil for more deep explorations of history, science, and the psychology behind humanity's greatest frontiers. Here, we do not just follow the map, we follow the questions that still remain.